You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends. Steve Stockton here with you. Welcome to Everything Out There. And joining me on the phone tonight is author, content creator, YouTuber, and paranormalist, Sysco Murdoch. Known Sysco for several years. We were introduced to each other by Soraya Askath from Where Did the Road Go? And we've had numerous appearances together, and we wrote a book together. We are all children in the wilderness of the afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. Now, actually, it's Sysco's book. I just followed along and did like the color commentary, if you will, at the end of it. Sysco, how you doing tonight?
Hello, and boo.
Boo, spooky season is here. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's wonderful. It's my pleasure. I mean, I can't imagine Halloween without you now. We've spent so many together.
Indeed. And I think, are we going to do Shannon's show again this year? That'll be like the 7th year in a row, I think.
I think it's 8.
8. It's been a few.
I think it's 8. It might even be 9. I'm not sure. I'm sure we're going to do it. I'm going to be ashamed if we didn't.
Yeah, I'll message her and then make sure we're still doing it because she usually pre-records that.
Yep, sounds good. I'm there.
I brought you here tonight to talk about that wonderful, wonderful book. Folks can find it on Amazon. I'll have a link in the show notes.
Well, thank you. Yep, it's it was fun to write, and I wrote it with a really nice person, and it was we had a very unique way of going about it. I would write a chapter and send it to him, and then he would put behind me whatever brought to mind that story, whether it was another story or just a thought or maybe some lore or a funny anecdote, and we left it as it was. And you were that man. It was so much fun writing it with you.
Yeah, I had a great time, but I was scared because you didn't want to see it until the whole book was finished. And I was nervous when I turned in the manuscript with my pieces in it. And I said, how is that? And you're like, don't change a word. So it worked out really good.
Yep. It stayed as it was. I never changed the word. It was perfect as it was, And that was the thing, though, because if you tell a story and you're into the person telling the story, and then the next thing that comes to your mind, or it reminds you of something, or you can add on to it, or you just have a thought about what it all meant, or what it meant to you, or any of that stuff, that instant reaction from it is what you want. Because I think when people tell stories, it changes the energy in the room or around the fire, or, around the dinner table afterwards, if you were lucky enough to be a kid to sit in with the adults for a little bit and hear some stories, and it takes you and it takes you away, and wherever it takes you, well, that's the next thing. It's like a chain, and that's how you have great conversations with people, when you gather together and talk about things like this, And you get to
I still have wonderful childhood memories of either being at my grandmother's house and sitting around the fireplace after dinner in the wintertime, or the wood stove at the other grandmother's house, or in the summertime sitting out on the screen porch as it got dark and listen to the older folks tell ghost stories. Love that.
Oh, wow. Right? Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
sticks with you. It gets under your skin, and you carry that around with you for a lifetime.
It does. And if you and I were both young when it hit us, so we were always listening and seeking answers, and tell me another one, and, tell me another story. Or, hey, have y'all ever seen any ghosts? And how many times in our lifetime have we heard, I don't believe in all that mess, or, whatever. And it's changed in our lifetime to where, people are a little bit more open to not just talking about it, but hearing about it, and, things like that. I mean, there are still a lot of skeptics. There's nothing wrong with skeptics, but the ones that just say, oh, all that stuff's just ridiculous. I don't believe in all the little green men and all that stuff, and just broad brush, don't believe in anything that might be outside of their normal. But the paranormal is extremely normal. The supernatural is very natural. And I don't understand why people can believe in so many other things, or put faith in so many other things. And then something as simple and as, like I said, natural as these events, whether it's ghosts or, portals or whatever you want to name, cryptids. I mean, a lot of cryptids are just species that we haven't identified yet. I think a shark at one time could have been considered a cryptid. Do you know what I mean? It's just stuff we don't
great
understand.
Apes, they didn't believe those existed until around the turn of the 20th century. They thought that was a myth or a legend, and then they found them.
Yeah. And it, like I said, it's just stuff that we don't completely understand yet. And I think a lot of things we think we understand, we don't have a clue anyway. You know how people put in, or believe in something for such a long time, and then you find out that it was all, we messed up, we were wrong, sorry, sorry about that. Or, things change the more information we find out about it. I wonder how, another 100 years, how people will feel about ghosts and things like that. I mean, 100 years ago, you and I have done episodes on 100 years ago. What were they doing? You know what they were doing? They were table tipping. They were using the spirit board. They were gathering in secret and so excited about it to gather around the table and do a reading or hear from a medium or,
exactly. And that was their normal. Yep. My maternal grandmother, they were part of the spiritualism movement. My mom was born in 1927. And when she was a little girl in the 30s, that was, they did that regularly. They had seances, they had table tappings, they had a Ouija board or spirit board sessions. My grandmother read cards. She didn't read tarot cards. She didn't like tarot cards, but she read tea leaves and coffee grounds, phrenology. She could tell your fortune by the bumps on your head or look at your palm. She interpreted dreams. But, that was just their normal. And it was my normal for a long time. I grew up not knowing that not everybody's grandmother was a self-proclaimed gypsy witch.
Yep. We got to keep them alive, too, and not let all that knowledge and wisdom and all those wonderful superstitions and herbal cures and, how just all that. We got to keep it all alive. So if you've got people like that in your family, the folks listening, encourage them to write it down or get a recorder and record them and tell them to tell you stories about their childhood and, or how to can tomatoes for Pete's sakes, how to grow a tomato for that matter. And, things that are growing in nature that have so many cures in them. It's an amazing thing. And really, when you get down to it, that's all being a granny witch is, and spells and learning how to read intuition, your ability,
the land and the plants, the
natural.
And the things that goes along with it, and a good healthy dose of the supernatural, but it all dovetails together nicely.
I mean, how many times, Steve, have we laughed at people or had people laugh, poo-pooing the idea of, oh, well, what do you mean you can't talk about if you don't talk about them, you mention them and they can hear you and they're going to come and bother you and stuff like that. And, and they say it like it's the most ridiculous thing they ever heard. And I just go, yeah. Because listen, Steve, this is why the paranormal, supernatural, the whole, if you want to call it a science, if you want to call it a genre, if you want to call it just something that's amazingly such a vast subject with a lot of little spider webs going all, little directions shooting out all over, but it's all connected. So it still amazes me to think about all right, here's two examples. I'll describe it and then because it's hard to give it a name. Our friend Rob Guttrow, the wonderful medium and a wonderful animal communicator, as well as a wonderful weatherman who works for the government, or did. I believe he's retired. So very smart man. So he's a scientist and he's all these things. Okay. He was at the Ford's Theater at Christmas time, and he's going to see the play A Christmas Carol, which is a wonderful thing they do every year, and I can't imagine how terrific it is. And he's waiting to go in for the show to start and everything, and he's killing time in the gift shop. he's picking up some books and looking through them, and he's reading a little bit here, a little bit there, and dust jackets, and flipping through pages and looking at pictures, putting one down and picking up another one. And he's there for a minute, and he's waiting on the people that he came in with so they can go into the theater. And while he's there, the thing about mediums, a lot of them will tell you that it's difficult for them to go in places and try to have a good time or watch a movie because there's always dead there. And if the dead know that he can hear them, it makes it very difficult night to be able to pay attention to the play. So he's got to throw boundaries down and ignore them and put them off, like not now, I'm trying to have an evening, maybe later kind of thing, And he's so funny the way he tells it, but it's got to be somewhat of a burden, Steve, honest to God, if you think about it, depending on how bad it is. And everybody's an individual different, but there's similarities. I've heard the same story from others. So when he's in this gift shop looking at books, what is he doing? He's thinking about the person that he's reading about. And it just so happened to be that he was reading about John Wilkes Booth. He's in Ford's Theater where Booth shot Lincoln, Washington, D.C., right? And there's this pesky, arrogant, strong energy presence that keeps hovering around him and getting closer and backing off and coming back and, and doing whatever Rob said it did. It's not now. I'm trying to have any whatever. And he's still getting messages from this guy. And he's like, oh, he was nasty and he was, really arrogant and, he was, rude and, a couple of different things. And he's like, he just didn't like, he was trying to get rid of him. And then he figured out who it was. It was John Wilkes Booth. Now, I asked Rob if he thought that John Wilkes Booth, it's a visitation type of haunting. He's not stuck there, in other words. He's been seen in other places and he's kind of a free roaming spirit. Let's just put it that way. I don't know if he's earthbound and he's crossed over and come back and he's just visitation that way. I didn't ask Rob and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but either way works. He's just there at Ford's Theater. And Rob and I both felt that it was because he was thinking about him. So Rob's thinking about him in a place that his energy is already connected to, which made the journey and the path, if you want to call it that, so simple and easy for John Wilkes Booth. He hangs around there and goes to other places where people are talking about him because he wants accolades. You see what I mean? So, and he wants the attention and he wants people to know the story. And he's talking to Rob like, he's still got that air that he did the right thing and, he should be getting awards kind of deal, treated called a hero and he wasn't. And he's just still spouting the same thing from then.
The same thing that he was spouting back in the day. But I wonder, could that be just because he's thinking of him? Could it be like picking up the psychic imprint that's there, or maybe even like a tulpa or something, like putting that energy out there is bringing it to him?
Well, I can't say it wouldn't be something like a tulpa because, the gentleman writer you knew, was it? I can never remember the name of the comic, and I know it as well as a was it The Shadow?
Yeah, the guy that wrote The Shadow as well, Walter Gibson, and he had several typewriters in a row. This was way before the days of computers or word processors, and he would sit there in his apartment in New York, or I think he had a townhouse, and jump from one typewriter to another and write these shadow stories. He wrote hundreds of stories for radio and for the dime novels and stuff. And he put literally so much blood, sweat, and tears into the character, Lamont Cranston, who was the Shadow, that he started seeing somebody that resembled the Shadow in his apartment. He was talking about one night he had some guests over for dinner and there was a walkway upstairs, like a hallway that opened over the dining room, formal dining room. And they're sitting there having dinner, and they see this guy up there with the trench coat and the slouch hat and the long scarf. And they thought, oh, that's great. You hired somebody to come in and dress up like the Shadow to entertain us. He said, no, I see that in and around here a lot of times. And he called it a psychic impression or some sort of impression like that he had spent so much time thinking about this character and bringing him to life, literally in words, that he came to life beyond that and was able to manifest. And that apartment in Greenwich Village, it's still haunted. and it's there's other spirits there. Hans Holzer investigated it, and my friend Dave Schrader, I can't remember, they were doing, I think, the Holzer files, and I mentioned that when I was doing an interview with him, and he said, "Oh, we'll have to look into that for sure." But I don't know whatever came of it beyond that. But yeah, Hans Holzer had investigated that apartment apart from the Walter Gibson stuff.
He's one of my favorites. You know that. I mean, he was the first book that I pulled down off the shelf and started thumbing through, where I was just like engrossed. I mean, that book absolutely enveloped me.
Yeah,
and
that was one of the ones that turned me on when I was a kid too. That and Fate magazine, and I think he had articles in there too.
Yeah, he did. Absolutely. But just to touch back on John Wilkes Booth. Now, the reason I lean so much towards and use that one as a sample of connecting to the thought energy, okay, you can also call it telepathic. You're sending those vibes out there. Now, look, this is how we get a lot of things communicate telepathically. A lot of spirits that I've met that have come back, you don't see their mouth move, but it's their voice, it's their tone, and you hear it in your head, but it's in like kind of a surround sound kind of thing. It's coming from the inside of your head out instead of the outside of your head in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
so there's some type of energy.
Voices like that, not in my head like I'm crazy, but I've heard things, responding or asking questions or things that I couldn't hear audibly. But like you said, I could hear it from the inside out instead of the outside in.
Weird. It's just so different. It's so hard to describe.
It's hard to describe it to anybody that's never experienced it, and it'd be like trying to describe a color or something to a blind person.
It is. You have to really start, digging down and get expressive, But that's, I listened to the way Rob described that, knowing he's got very practiced filters. And the way he described it, it did sound more to me that like he was thinking about this man, and either he was cruising through, and it's like, hey, what are they saying about me over here? That kind of thing. Or he can see me. He didn't know, but he really felt like his thoughts attracted it. And I thought that was pretty cool, because we were talking about, do you think he's stuck there and he's just haunting the place, And he's like, no, he's showing up wherever people are paying attention and talking about it.
Well, Booth was an actor. He was a stage actor.
Yes,
it would make sense for him to be in that theater. And like, any actor, he wants to hear what the press or whoever is saying or thinking about him. So he shows up to see what's going on and to see what kind of reviews he's getting, as it were.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's amazing to me to think that it's easy for people, well, maybe not easy, let's not use that word, let's say simpler for people to accept that than to say, if you are in the woods and you're talking about a creature that may be out there, for lack of a better word, I'll say creature out there, that if you are talking about them, that they can't tune in and hear that freak, whatever that is, same way that a spirit would. See, and that blows my mind, though, Steve, because it's connected.
That's a good analogy or a good theory there. Just because you're out there and you hear a noise in the woods and you think Bigfoot, and then maybe you have an encounter, you see one. And that's another one. People say, oh, well, it can't exist because we've never found a carcass. Well, I've hiked all over the Great Smokies. I've never seen a bear carcass either, but I know they exist. I know there's bears in the park. So just because we haven't found a dead one, I don't think that's a good enough reason to just, poo-poo the whole thing and say they don't exist.
Right. Well, you know how I feel about that stuff, Steve. And I'm not going to say that, I live as strongly as a lot of my ancestors did, as far as being indigenous, and being Native American or Indian, whatever you want to call it. But so close to nature and so attuned, because they lived it. They lived it every day. This, that was their world. And to them, there's not a nation that doesn't talk about the hairy man or the wild man or Sasquatch. Most of the words, whatever the tongue may be, describes just people. It's like the hairy man or whatever. I also believe that there's more than one kind, just like there's more than one kind of, a dog is a species. How many different kind of dogs are there?
Right.
You get my,
and, exactly.
And
they're all canines, but there's all kinds of different breeds and colorings and sizes. I think
and there's some more aggressive, some more docile, more.
Like that.
Yep, there's some more docile, more social. There's some that are just loners, like the wolf, or just you could go on and on and on with that. But the point is I don't want to say I was always brought up, because I was with so many different people, little pieces of wisdom here and there from different elders along the way, and my grandmother, she would give me little tidbits. And as young as I can, remember her telling me there are things in the woods that we do not speak of because they can hear you. And she was very picky. She was very picky about the things she said. And she said them always impromptu and very secretive. Like she was telling me, the combination of the safe or something. You know what I mean? And she didn't, and also scared about it, like she didn't want anybody else to hear.
Yeah,
and I didn't realize that was almost
the same way. She would talk about stuff in hushed tones, and she wasn't native, as far as I know. They immigrated over from England and landed in the Cades Cove area, the Smokies. But the same thing. There was just some stuff you didn't talk about, some stuff you didn't do. You didn't whistle after dark. If a hen crowed, she wasn't long for this world. If the cows mooed after dark, that was a sign or an omen. There was all these little cards rules of thumb
cannot play cards. Yep, in the thunderstorm and the lightning, you can't play cards because the devil gets you. You can't talk on the phone, and they had a reason for that, but that was, you could get struck by lightning. I think that Danny Brinkley got struck by lightning twice that way. I could be wrong, but I know he was talking on the phone on one of them. Got struck by lightning, but
couldn't talk on the phone.
So
couldn't take a
shower. Like
couldn't wash dishes. Couldn't be around a dog.
Don't speak ill of the dead.
Yeah, don't whistle past the graveyard.
Yep.
Another superstition. I don't believe she necessarily had this one, but I've heard people say that you should hold your breath when you go by a graveyard because you can inhale a spirit. And if you hold your breath,
I didn't hear that one.
That's.
I think that's need to know information. That should be more. There should be signs. There should be signs up about that one.
Sign up outside the graveyard. Hold your breath.
Everybody, hold your breath. You all right? Right here and go. You hold it to get to the next sign. Can you imagine? It's kind of funny. Oh man, I never heard that. We just start a few tonight, Steve. Just make up our own.
Yeah, and I've done that. I've cataloged a lot of superstitions, a lot of folklore, mainly from the Southern Appalachians, but then there's variations of it all over the country, and you wonder how those get started. Did somebody's hen crow and somebody died, and they thought, oh, well, the hen crowed, and then Uncle Ed died, so that must have been a warning because hens don't crow. So but in a lot of them, I think they lived this long from so long ago because there's some truth to them. I think so. And those people, I mean they didn't have the internet or TV. If you're lucky, you had books and maybe phonograph records, a radio. And but other than that, you had to pass the time somehow. And even if you had a radio, a lot of those stations signed off, after dark. And they had to entertain themselves somehow. And that was one of the ways that both my families did that. They would sit around the wood stove or the fireplace in the wintertime when it was too cold to farm or do anything like that, and swap stories and tell legends and things like that. And I miss those times.
I do too, man. I do too. And I mean, I feel bad, we need to go back and talk about the Bigfoot because, you had asked me a question. I didn't quite answer it. I was basically just trying to tell everybody I'm basing that as a little kid. I'm talking 6, 7 years old, and I'm being given this kind of information. So everything that came after that, I always looked at differently than other people, or at least other people that hadn't been told that by, with that kind of, because you could replace Native American with a mountain person, a person that's, a farmer, a rural farm. You know what I mean? Everybody's got that. They know to pay attention to things in the woods. Don't take it for granted.
The signs. You pay attention to things in the woods, and
right.
People like my father that lived literally out in the middle of nowhere in Middle Tennessee, over on the Cumberland Plateau. They had a 900-acre farm that backed up against the Big South Fork, which is now a national recreation area. There were immigrants in that area from Germany, from Ireland, from Scotland, and all those people brought their traditions and their folklore. And you just have that great oral tradition in the South of storytelling and things. I think I come by it naturally, just from being around it. Like I said, that was my normal. I grew up hearing people tell stories, and then I grew up to be a storyteller, raconteur. And I love it. I don't know any other way to be.
I always love that word, raconteur. Yep. That's the thing, man. And as you say, if they brought their culture, and something just about every culture had was the hairy man in the woods, the big man, the Sasquatch. There's a name for each and every single tongue out there in language across the globe. There's Asia, it's all different all over the place. And it's people don't think that it's related because, say, the abominable snowman, and there is one. And if you want to have fun, I think 2019, there was a squad up there. I can't remember what army they were with, but they were a little branch off. And they discovered footprints in the snow out there by their base, and it was amazing. And they called it an abominable snowman.
And you have that.
It's just a Bigfoot with white.
You have Sasquatch. You have Bigfoot.
That's it. Thank you.
You have the skunk ape. You have it's in all areas of the U.S. and throughout the world in different cultures, and particularly the Native American cultures. The Indians in the Pacific Northwest.
Every single one.
The Native Americans in the Pacific Northwest, where I lived, they believed in it. And then the tribes here in New England, they had stories. It's the same stories, just a different location. There'll be slight variations.
And that even includes the plains. Yes, it does. It includes the plains, because people think that they're not in the desert and they're not, but that's not true. Now, is it that they stay there all the time, or do they have a way of traveling back and forth to where they want to go? And we're just catching them there.
That's migratory. And then I've already put forth that they vibrate at a different frequency than humans do, either higher or lower. That maybe they can do that at will. That's why you only see them at certain times, and they're so hard to get a picture of. Comedian Mitch Hedberg once famously quipped that the Bigfoot creature itself is blurry. So when you take a picture of a Bigfoot and it comes out blurry, that's why, because he's blurry.
Well, you know what? Mitch wasn't wrong. He's not wrong. Because this is what I was taught. And as I grew up and I started digging into it, again, I went at it with a different vantage point on it. And I'm no Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Sagway expert here. I'm just saying, through my lifetime, I just accepted it as is. Now, what I grew to understand about it in, you can call it theory, speculation, whatever you want, but it's based on all the data I've collected over a lifetime, 60 years.
Literally. We were talking about that one night on your show. Between the both of us, we have over 100 years experience looking into these things, ghosts and paranormal, supernatural, cryptids. I started, I've had experiences when I was around like 3, and then saw my first apparition around my 6th birthday. I had encounters in the woods when I was like 7 and 8 and things. It just, again, that was my normal. I didn't know that everybody didn't do that, but I was taught to keep yourself to yourself. So it just wasn't something you talked about. Now, Part of that, I think, was out of fear. You didn't want people to think you were crazy. And I ran into that when I was collecting those stories for my first book, Strange Things in the Woods, especially the older folks, friends of my parents that were their age. I was a late in life unexpected baby, and my parents were the age of a lot of my friends' grandparents. So when my parents would go and visit their friends, it would be, people their age or older usually. And they were reticent to talk about some of the stuff they'd seen. They thought you were going to make fun of them or call them crazy. It was sometimes getting that first story out was like you had to drag it out with a log chain. But then when they saw that you had a genuine interest and that you believed what they were saying, then they'd get a little more freer and a little more freer. And then the stories would just flow. I've had, there's an old gentleman over around Jamestown named Otto Darrow. He was a first generation American. His parents had immigrated over from Ireland. I finally got him opened up to where he told me stories that his wife had never even heard before. She's like, you never told me that. But I wish I'd had more time with him. He wouldn't let me record him, so I just had to take notes. I don't know if that was a superstitious thing or he just didn't like the way he sounded. He had a really, really thick Appalachian accent. Don't. And he'd say, I brought a little tape recorder, a little reel to reel. I was just a kid. And he's like, nope. He said, I'll tell you stories, but you ain't recording me. So I just had to take notes. And of course, it was years later when I wrote the book, but those stories, they get ingrained in you. You remember the little nuances. And I tried to tell it in the way that it was told to me, with the slang and the odd words and things, the colloquialisms and things that they used. I felt that lent more of an authenticity to it. I mean, I could have gone in and made it letter perfect and written it in proper English, but it just wouldn't carry the weight as it does being told the way that it was told to me. And I state that in the book. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. I feel the same way. I did that in, when I wrote Cabin 22, and I wouldn't, I don't want to change the way somebody speaks. That's their personality. I mean, if they say, well, golly, that's how it's going to have to be written, because how are you going to change it, or the grammar or whatever?
Yeah. When we did this book, oh, golly gee, or oh, wow, they said, golly. Yeah. So it's like,
Steve and I had the experience when we wrote this book. This is funny, and Steve will remember this, I have no doubt. So we're going through editors. This book had 4 editors, and it's still, you're going to find a mistake or two in it. This is not a perfect novel. This is our first, novel. We left it as is, but it's pure, and it's, you know what I mean? It's from the heart, but we ran it through 4 different editors, and we're done. The first one we gave it to, God bless him. I love this man. He's an honorable man. He was a wonderful, absolute, genuine hero in the Vietnam War, and smart as all get out. And he was a professor, so he volunteered to edit at first. And he, like I said, he was a professor. He was into literature. He changed everything. He put notes in the side. He told stories. He corrected the grammar, and he changed the way people talk, and the way they spoke and how they, it was insane. Right, Steve?
Yeah. It changed the whole book, the nature of it, and just the energy of it. And he didn't last very long.
Oh, gosh, we had to go back and change it. Steve was pulling his hair out because he had to cut and paste and try to take things back, because this guy had moved it. He changed margins. He did, I don't know what in the world. All we asked him to do was correct the spelling.
Yeah. Just common mistakes. But he literally, he rewrote the book, and that wasn't what we needed at all.
Oh, gosh.
I remember we were talking about my book, and I knew you had all these fantastic stories. I mean, we talked for hours on the phone, just swapping stories back and forth, not broadcasting it or doing it on YouTube or anything, but just talking. And I said, you've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. You've got to write a book. And finally, one day you said, okay, I'm going to do it, but I'm taking you with me. So that was literally how it came about.
Yep. That's what we did. And it's cool. You know what, Steve? You know what we haven't done?
What's that?
We haven't said the name of the book yet.
I said it in the intro before I brought you in.
Okay.
Now, Sysco loves these long titles, and it took me about 2 years to get it right. We are all children in the wilderness of the afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life.
Absolutely. There it
You
is.
can find it on Amazon. And then
if you're
Sysco is on YouTube, Journey Through the Gate Paranormal Portal Podcast. I told you she likes those long titles.
I do too. I just love it. Well, here's the thing. I started out with this little, it's not really a mantra. It's more like, I think people need to slow down and take their time with things. Everybody push the button instant fast. And I know everybody loves the tickety talks and all that mess, and everything's really fast. You're just getting seconds and bam, 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 bam. You're not really engaging, not, broad brush, but you get my meaning. We're losing that long form. Let's kick back and have a conversation.
Exactly.
Let's kick back and get
I had somebody comment on one of my videos recently on Among the Missing. They didn't like it because I had a 25-second intro. What? I mean, that's if you don't have a 25-second attention span.
Mine are 25 minutes.
Yeah, seriously. But, that's the way I tell stories. There's an intro. I go into the cases or whatever Nicole has written for me to narrate, and then I have a conclusion and an outro. Yeah, that's just the way I was taught to do it.
Yeah. Well, see, with mine is people they misunderstand, because what happens with my channel, Journey Through the Gate, is we go in there on Sunday, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern. Please come, please join, subscribe. It's an acquired taste, but here's why. Because we talk about things. We try to tell the truth. Popular, unpopular, whatever. This is what we've learned so far. We're still learning. We're talking about it. It's a fantastic live chat. And this is the thing. I understand a little bit. I'm no scholar, but about frequencies and vibrations. And you have to understand, as a light worker, whatever your abilities are, or even if you're just a person trying to put more light into the world than darkness because you don't want to go down with it, even if it's just for you, and you don't consider yourself a light worker, but you're the one in the office tries to make everybody laugh. You're the one that's like, it's going to be okay. You're a glass half full kind of person. And you try to look at the positive side, and all the way up to people with multiple abilities that are, really intentionally
and we've had
walking
some spectacular
out,
shows.
That light out.
I've been sitting in over there with you on Mondays for a few years now.
Yeah.
And we've had some just amazing shows, and we've both learned stuff that we didn't think of, or you would say something and I'd say,
more information.
What about this? And you'd say, I never thought of it that way. And that's what it is. It's like an open dialogue and a discussion, and then the audience gets to participate as well. We got a great crowd over there. You have a wonderful, wonderful audience. And it's just it's a unique experience and a community. There's a sense of community there. We're all there seeking answers. And then, as we found out, the longer you do this, you get more questions. I've got more questions now than when I started delving into all of this. That's just the nature of it.
And you're learning more. And it's pieces. Everybody's got a piece of, to the puzzle here. Even if you've been holding on to it for a while, maybe if you had that piece upside down, we kind of help each other turn that puzzle piece the right direction sometimes and go, oh, snap, And that's what's cool about it. But the going back to the intros real quick, when, people complain about 25 a second, that's exactly my point. People can't wait and get into it, because that's the whole idea. You used to go and see a movie and a film, and it wouldn't be a bunch of advertisements. It would be easing you into the big picture. It would be easing you into the subject, and that's what I do with my intros, because this is the deal. If you are a light worker, you know that in order to grow in that and to be able to help other people, you have to walk into the darkness every once in a while. You have to be able to go in the darkness, pull somebody out, you have to go through the darkness to learn, about how important the light is and where and how to use your abilities and keep your frequencies and your vibration up, right? So the whole idea of my intros is, if we're going to have a dark subject, like we're going to talk about axe murders, or we're going to talk about Jack the Ripper, or we're going to go in there and do some H.H. Holmes, or an assassination of a president, or whatever.
And those are all topics we've covered.
Oh yeah, and then some. And you want a little light first, and it also gives the chat a chance to come in and get a good seat. Now, if you come in there in the beginning live, how you're going to see it is everybody coming in, greeting each other, asking them how they are, that thing they were talking about last week, how'd that turn out? How's that pet that's sick? Did they get better? Yes, they did. And everybody in the chat's happier for it. What's really happening also behind the scenes is everybody is coming in and they're shedding their day. They've had, this is Sunday night. They've had a long week. They've done their stuff. And before they got to go start another week, we're going to get together. We're going to talk about something really groovy. But first, we're going to raise our vibration and leave some stuff from our day behind. And we can walk in that darkness. We can walk in that murder scene or that vampire or whatever, and come back out, and we do the opposite. We give a little light on the way out, and we're done.
Yeah. And it's like going to a spa. That come in there that have genuine problems, be it physical problems, health problems, and they ask for prayer or support, or just send them light and things like that. I mean, it's a healing and nurturing environment, in addition to all the creepy stuff that we delve into.
At the same time, we're talking about, Lizzie Borden and getting, listen, guys, when we do a case over there, we do, say, Villisca Axe murder. Steve was part of it. We didn't just, tell the story of Villisca. We got the definitive expert. Now, I'll use the word expert for this gentleman, wouldn't you, Steve? Dr. Ed Epperly.
Dr. Epperly is an expert on that case. And I don't like to be called an expert. And usually if somebody identifies themselves as an expert, particularly the paranormal, I'll run the other way. I don't think there are experts. They're researchers and things. But as far as that case goes, and that's he didn't really talk so much about the supernatural element, but the wheres and whys of the crime that was committed. So he's definitely an expert about the Villisca Axe murders.
Absolutely. And the book he wrote is called Fiend Incarnate. So if you want to know about that case, don't pass go, don't question $200. Just get that book and read it.
What was the title again?
It's called Fiend Incarnate, the Villisca Axe murder case of
Dr. Ed Epperly.
Dr. Ed Epperly, Epperly. Now, the easy thing to do is go over to my channel and look up Villisca Axe murder, and you'll get the whole thing. I've got it all in the playlist for you from the first show on. And I think we did 3 shows with him, Steve, didn't we? 2 hours apiece.
3 or maybe 4. It was substantial.
And he came back and did a Q&A live with the chat and the gatekeepers. It was an amazing time. So if you ever want to know about this case, you can go in the beginning of that. By the time you get through that gauntlet of information, and
you'll be an expert on it too. And for an octogenarian, he has more energy than I do. And he just, especially, I mean, you could tell when he started talking about that case, it just lit him up. He's literally made it his life's work to find out everything that he could possibly know about this case. And as much as they even interviewed family members of eyewitnesses,
people that were there.
Yeah.
He interviewed one of the first police that was in the policeman that was in the door. Because the thing is Ed has been doing this for 65 years. I think he was 18, 19, something like that when he first started, because he started the first year of college for some kind of history paper, and he lived near Villisca. So he pretty much lived it, wound up being a professor at the college not far from there, and was able to get more information and letters and more access to documents and things like that other people never had.
So amazingly, he has the believed murder weapon.
Yeah.
That I don't know how he came into possession of that. I forgot the story, but he used to get it out at dinner parties and pass it around. Yeah,
that's why he said now that there's DNA, it wouldn't do any good, because he said there'd be more turkey gravy on that and chicken grease and anything else. He said, but because And that sounds so macabre, and it is. How could you pass around such a horrible thing? And that's the first thing that comes to my mind too. But then I look back and I go, people are going to do it. I mean, there's a case doing these podcasts and doing the shows with you and doing the research and having the interest that I do, as crazy as it sounds, but we all do. And Eric from Unseen Paranormal told me at the Gettysburg Bash, standing on the battlefield, which is just, I love stuff like that. And he said to me, and it just made me laugh, he said, honey, I have to research true crime just to cleanse my palate of the paranormal.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And it's like a Venn diagram. Those circles overlap. The ghost stories and true crime, paranormal cryptids, all those circles overlap each other.
It's so true. It's so true. But you find some good shows over there. But the thing is, it's not just the good shows. The thing is, the people we get to talk to, the knowledge we've been able to acquire from so many wonderfully talented, their intent is impeccable. It's like when you get to the end of all this and you've weeded through all the weeds, you know what I mean? And you get to this point where you just have this amazing palette of wonderful souls and talented, wonderful people in your Rolodex, I guess, and now it's in your computer and your cell phone in your mind, I guess. But the thing is it amazes me. It gives the whole phrase, I got a guy, a whole different look,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you've got such a roster there. You've got a guy for everything. You want to talk dog man? You've got an expert on that, or a researcher. Some of those guys, I wouldn't necessarily claim that they're experts, but got people that have done their research and know what they're talking about. UFOs, crime cases like that, a little bit of everything. There's something for everybody at some point over there. Now, like you said, it is an acquired taste, and it's not all the time for everybody. But if you like that sort of thing, you'll find something on your channel that suits your palate.
Yep. I just tell people in the beginning, if you don't like this one, this one's too much. See you Monday. See you next Sunday. See you. Because not everybody wants to hear about that, and people wonder why too. And it's not just that they circle, kind of overlap each other, and they do. But I think it's also because it keeps you sharp. It's almost the same reason people do crossword puzzles in a way. It's solving a little mystery. It's research, and it's using, it's cognitive, and it's using, deductive reasoning, and it's just, you do little exercises like that. I look at it as an exercise in discernment. Some of the things we learn in these cases, these ghost experiences, or these other, cases, whether it's a dogman or a Bigfoot encounter or something along those lines, you learn from each and every one of them, and you learn from each and every one of these people. And, to be able to talk to somebody. Steve and I do a couple of shows on my channel that reach back to 1975 documentaries talking about ghosts, talking about psychic energies, talking about ESP, and that's when they were testing and guess what's on the card kind of stuff, and putting them through all kind of tests, like like a bunch of white mice,
there, or the sealed envelope test and things like that.
Yeah. And they still do that. I mean, I know they test a lot of people to get them certified, this, that, medium, whatever, psychic. Yeah. But the thing is they miss so much of the good stuff.
Experts, or not experts necessarily, but we've delved into the history of the Ouija board, how that came to be, and how there was a time, in San Francisco when people were going nuts in the street because of Ouija boards and stuff. That was when we started looking into
that's
stuff
true.
From 100 years ago. We did that special.
Yep.
And
there was complaining about the aftermath
at one time.
Yeah. And bad things happen. And
deep dive on the Lincoln assassination. And one of the most amazing things about that to me, there was somebody recently, just a few years ago, writing a book about it, and they started getting death threats. Now, what kind of conspiracy or cover-up is at play there that long after the event,
Right.
There's still things that people don't want you peering too closely at.
And we kind of came to the conclusion of who that might have been in that the end of that episode. I think that was like 6 episodes, because I went all the way back to his mother and him, and how she came to be where she was, and what happened to her.
The 27 Club with the rock musicians. We talked cursed films and cursed books, and just there's a plethora, literally a myriad of stuff over there that
Charles Manson.
Something for everybody. Yep.
The McDonald killing, the McDonald massacre on Fort Bragg, I think it was, wasn't it? I think it was. I think it was Bragg. But that was horrible. Yeah. And that was with all the hippies and, acid is groovy, kill the pigs or what all. It was very similar to the Helter Skelter. We dug all that up. We hit the Titanic. We went through the Titanic. Through icebergs at people. Steve, tell them that one.
Yeah, we were doing a show about the Titanic.
I'm so sorry, but
and literally, we were mentioning places where there's a Titanic exhibit, and the 2 that I'm aware of, there's one in Las Vegas, and there's one in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And literally, within just a few seconds of us mentioning the one in Pigeon Forge,
he's not lying.
Artificial iceberg that they had there, it was real ice. I guess they've got liquid nitrogen or something running through pipes. They had an iceberg that you could actually touch and feel. It collapsed and sent like 3 people to the hospital within seconds. And the 911 call went out, and that was the time when we had mentioned it. And we've had that happen on a lot of occasions with people, with celebrities we've talked about.
Yep.
We will mention a celebrity just in passing maybe, and then by the time the next week the show rolls around again, that celebrity would have passed on. That's kind of frightening. Yep. We have to be careful who we talk about sometimes.
We do. And it's not funny. It really isn't. We often wonder what's going on, because with electronics and, you're in the airwaves, you're picking up. I mean, think about it, people. It's so simple. Flip in and out, energies. And I mean, if an entity can know when you're talking about them, whether it's a loved one, you're thinking about them on their birthday or something like that, and the medium, you find out down the line through a medium or somebody else or psychic, and they tell you that, hey, I heard you talking when you were talking on my birthday that time, or whatever might come through, but you find that out. It's amazing to me, again, but it's no different than being in the woods and telepathically getting a message, stay back, or go, or that kind of feeling, what I mean?
Go a different way, go around.
Go a different way, back
I've
up,
had that in the woods before, when it goes silent.
And it goes dead silent.
You can't hear the birds, you can't hear the leaves, you can't hear
no cricket,
the water or the traffic in the distance,
or
the other
the wind even stops.
That's a sign that you're in some place that you don't need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why, if you back up and you get a view from, I don't care whether it's a 30,000 or 40,000 foot view, go up as high as you need to and look down and take a look at the bigger picture. You can't poo-poo, say that Bigfoot doesn't have any abilities, because this person had this experience with Bigfoot and he didn't act like that. But somebody else has an experience that might be a little bit more on the supernatural side, like maybe a fuzzy photograph and nothing, it didn't look fuzzy to them, or blurry, like you said, or as like in Skinwalker Ranch, looking, and all of a sudden it looked like somebody unzipped the sky and this rip appeared, and this thing just stepped out of it, looked both ways and walked on and disappeared. Well, what the heck is that?
Yeah, what is that? A portal, a rift in time? Some sort of machinery that we're not aware of that can cause that?
But you get account after account after account after account of these things. And that's why I was saying went all the way back to 75, talking about Bigfoot and creatures, different things seen in the woods. And these people that we're listening to doing this documentary have been doing it 25 years. So now you can go all the way back even more. And we're listening to it now, 2023, and it's like, that's such an accumulation of eyewitness accounts, so many different things. And I think that's also what causes the fight. It's just like ghosts, Steve. You know, we're always arguing about what they can and can't do, or what we should and shouldn't do, or all this other stuff, instead of saying, man, look, this is all going on. It's all individual. Everybody's going to have a different experience with a ghost. There's so many, what's the ghost going through? Why is it doing it? Why is it here? Is it an essence of a person, like a residual that just keeps looping? Is it intelligent? If it's intelligent, what's going on with the ghost? And why is it attached? Why is it showing himself? Or does it even know you exist?
And I think it's like that old story about the 4 blind men describing an elephant. Each one experienced the same elephant, but they all described it differently, because one had the trunk, one had the tail, one had the side, and the same with the Bible. You've got the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they're all depictions of Christ, but from that individual person's view. And I've heard people argue that, well, how come the apostles couldn't even get it right? They all told a different story. It's just their perception and what they observed or saw. And I think that's 100%. What it is. 2 people can have an experience, and sometimes it will be identical. They heard the same thing, but sometimes there's variations in there. One person saw it do this, another person heard it talk. It's just, it's an individual thing, how open you are to it and what your perception of it is.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. I just think that the problem is we're getting so stuck in on the semantics of it, we're missing the big picture here, Right. And we're also missing the fact that, how many different accounts of these creatures being telepathic, like I said. Well, in my experience, also, so are these human spirits. I try to refer to the ones that have crossed over and come and visit loved ones or whatever happens there, or sometimes come back to try to get other ghosts to cross, and these kind, all telepathic. How many alien stories, alien visitations, telepathic?
Yeah,
right. How many stories?
Described like a gray alien or whatever. They're looking at them, but the mouth doesn't move, but they can hear them talking.
Correct. So correct. And I've had personal experiences, same thing, telepathic. Mouth doesn't move. It's their voice, sounds like them, and I hear it in my head, just like we said earlier, right? But it's the same with so many of these Bigfoot stories. And I was amazed to find out when I started researching even deeper into Dogman. When I wrote Cabin 22, a lot of that stuff came to me and it just seemed natural, so I put it in there. I did refer to many people that are much, more into Dogman and Rougarou and, their habits and what's the lore and things like that. I touched on that. Of course, I got a guy, so I go to him. Hey, what would happen if this? How do you think they would react? So I could get it right. But the other stuff, the spiritual stuff, the trying to understand how I started out with it was thinking, what would a wolf do? And a wolf pack is going to act very much like that. There's going to be an alpha. There's going to be a leader. There's going to be, the ones that, you know what I'm saying? So I went that route, but
and I've heard process, of that in hauntings, where there's multiple entities or apparitions there. There will be one that's dominant, that they want to be the one to talk. Yeah. They want to be the one to do things. They won't have more energy want you to even acknowledge the other spirits that are there. You hear that a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But when I was doing that book, it just amazed me that a lot of that stuff kind of wrote itself. But the more, I guess what I'm trying to say is they were very telepathic as well. And then here just recently, this is like 2-3 years after the writing, I find out they are, because I'm starting to dig in and research a little deeper, and I'm hearing these experiences people are having where they were throwing out thoughts to, the people that were seeing them. They knew what it was thinking, and it blew my mind. And I thought, well, why not? Everything else does,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was like, well, why not?
Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, while those are true accounts, Cabin 22, that's a fictional retelling of actual events. So everything that you've got in there, and there's everything literally, including the kitchen sink that's haunted, those are based on other people's experiences or things that you've heard or things that you've experienced, just presented in a different way. That's paranormal fact fiction, I guess you would call it.
It is. And the thing is I would say that not everything in there is exactly, that, but you're not going to know which ones. And I can tell you also that it's the craziest ones. Those are the ones that are true.
Because and the original short story that started that saga, that was based on an actual cabin that you and your mother stayed in Alabama. Is that correct?
Me and my sons.
Oh, okay.
My sons and I. That didn't happen to us, but that's how I had that feel about it, because it was so easy to just throw the ghost in,
Yeah.
That one I made up out of whole cloth, though. Yeah. But that was for your birthday, because his birthday, folks, is on Halloween, and he had this bright idea, started a YouTube channel, and I think I prodded you into that one too. And
yeah, you did. I'd written the book, and I said I wanted to narrate, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to narrate, and I thought, well, dummy, you've got these books that you've written, and you even helped me name the channel. I was bouncing some ideas around, and you actually said 13 past midnight. Go with that one, and it's over 13,000 subscribers now.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So he did this on that channel, Halloween. He did 31 days of Halloween. So that's a show a day, folks, for 31 days straight. So, that's editing and reading and narrating and sometimes writing, sometimes reading something you already wrote, just all these different
having
things.
To guess, but I have something up every night.
Every night.
Yeah.
Every night. And that gets, somewhere around 28, it gets a little dry. You get a little tired, 25, 26, So
I
said
that mid-October slump, where you're about 16, 17, 18 days in, and like, am I going to ever make it to the end of October? I ain't going to make it.
Yeah. I still got a little hill to climb.
You wrote that little story.
Yeah.
And
for a birthday.
You recorded it and sent it to me, and that was a night off work for me.
Yep, that's what I said. I said, here, take the night off. Here's a story I wrote. And I narrated it and recorded it and edited it for you, put in a bunch of little wonderful like screams and stuff in there, and all kind of crazy laughter, spooky music in the beginning and everything. And I said, here, happy birthday, take the night off. And everybody loved it and said that, and Steve came back and said, everybody's asking, is there more of these that they like it? They like the voices, because I did all kind of crazy voices and stuff. And so you challenged me and said, I bet you can't write a story. We were talking about Scooby-Doo and the way that those are formatted with the, it's a Mr. Green, that kind of thing, I said, write a Halloween story with everything about Halloween in it, and make it come out the other way.
And it ended up being about 14 hours long, start to finish, over 6 or 7 episodes, I think.
Yep. Almost. I think it's almost 15 hours straight, because it's fully narrated.
Sometime this month for spooky season, you're going to play that in its entirety. Play it live. I'm looking forward to it. Play it live
on the show. Everybody's going to be in the chat. We have snacks. We have recipes. We have bacon caramel popcorn. We have Mrs. McGee's apple pie moonshine, and I'll tell you what, that's pretty good. It's got apple cider and Fireball and a couple other things in it. Some vanilla vodka. It's crazy how good it is. Brown sugar around little brown sugar and honey around the rim. It's good stuff on crushed ice. Oh my God!
I'm a teetotaler, but that sounds good. If I was going to drink, I would drink something like that.
There's a non-alcoholic version as well. It doesn't have quite the same kick, but it's tasty as all get out. So you can still sit at the table, Steve. So anyway, we're gonna listen to that. But the bizarre thing about that whole thing for me, though, is how some of that book wrote itself, and it's the more spiritual stuff or the more paranormal stuff, whatever. And it kills me. Even the people and the characters, the way they acted and the things that happened with them. There's this part in the book, in the Cabin 22, where this guy has such an obsession with a rat that he can't catch. It's always missing his traps and it won't take his bait, and it's too quick for him, and it's real slick and hiding, and it can jump and ditch and dive, and it's really pissing him off. And the whole thing between this crazy, greasy, moonshining, mountain dude from just a great character. But he's a little shady, and he doesn't like to be outdone by a rat. And it turns into almost what you said, Steve, like Moby Dick.
Yeah, it does. That rat becomes his nemesis.
Yep.
And that's just that. There's so much subtext and so many other story arcs going on within the story. It's just amazing.
Yep. And it tells, and the whole time you don't realize you're being taken on a journey through all these different aspects of the paranormal. And, whether it's a young girl with abilities just trying to understand them and has no idea how powerful she really is, to even, there's a dog and his name is Rage, and he's an amazing animal. And the way he becomes what he becomes in this story, I think that's like a whole nother parallel story in the book too, Steve, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, and Rage and that's the dog's name, right?
Yeah, the dog's name is Rage.
And Dave, they could have their own series. You could do like a continuing series with just those characters.
That'd be great to write another. I'd like to.
Yeah, and what did they do after the cabin? Because you've had people come and ask that. Well, after Dave and Rage got out of there, then what did they do next?
What's next? Well, I'll tell you what. You never know, Steve. You never know.
That's how I was taught to write fiction. Is you ask yourself that question: what happens next?
And that's all I had to do is do that and put my fingers on the keys. And I think a couple of spirits got a hold of me and wrote it themselves. I don't even know if
I seriously believe there was some automatic writing going on there, because
I do too.
I'd be like, where did you get that idea? And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But it's like, it still blows my mind. Like you said, Steve, I have more questions than answers, but that doesn't mean I haven't gotten some answers that I'm totally satisfied with and make so much sense. Again, call them theories, call them, where I'm at. I don't know what, but it's amazing how at this point of my understanding, right or wrong, it's all coming together where everything is connected. And I can't quite express that as strongly as as I'm feeling it. It's just, I don't mean that everybody's in cahoots with one another. I mean, Dogman's cahooting with the fairies or or the aliens or whatever. I'm not saying they're not, because there's many people who spend a lot of time researching that have some pretty good facts on Bigfoot connections to UFOs or UFO sightings. And
yeah, and that's one thing I've noticed. That a lot of times when you have an encounter with one, there'll be an encounter with the other. If you have UFO sightings in an area, there's usually going to be a Bigfoot sighting in the same area at or around the same time.
That's true.
Are they connected? And, are they not?
Yeah, I had the Connollys on. And that's a father and son team. They've been at it quite a while, several decades. And they have pins all over the globe of what you just mentioned, of connections, between the two and sightings. And it's really incredible. And like I said, that's when you start getting it, when you back up and you look at all of it together, instead of two people in a room fighting or three people in a room or at a convention, which is a lot of people in a room fighting about it, where they're saying, no, Bigfoot doesn't do that because I was there and I saw him do this and I've studied him for this long and I've seen him do this. and somebody else comes in and says, well, no, I've seen him do this, this, and this, you got to understand there's more than one kind.
Yeah. And I've been to some of those conventions when I lived in the Pacific Northwest, and literally you would see people get into almost fist fights over what Bigfoot does or doesn't do, or Sasquatch, or whatever you want to call it.
Yep. And I think it's almost easier to digest if you look at it like, I think most people know, when you say a squirrel, have a visual in their mind. But I assure you, if you get in a car and you go around state to state and look at the squirrels, they change.
They're different
Some
sizes,
might be a little more hairy.
Color. They have different habits and different places that they forage for food.
Different
in any species, you're going to find some difference in them.
And they change.
From one area
and when
to
you
another.
Start adding, when you start adding in the, the maybe non-physical aspect of it, like what if there was something that could live in another dimension or different frequency, different vibration, you know what I mean? And not be physical. I mean, and then come through whatever they come through, a portal, the veil, a dimension, coming in to our world and just at that time be physical and have that ability to do those things back and forth. Well, that would explain not finding bodies, right? What if there's some Bigfoot that go in and out of the portals, and some that have gone in and out of the portals, but over time decided to stay and become more physical in this world and decided to, break off and be their own tribe, much like many other continents have had indigenous people breaking off and going and creating new tribes and a new people. Because again, I go back to the native people's names for these creatures, however broad you want that brush to be, usually refers to them as a people. The people who live in the woods, the forest people or the hairy people or this type is what I mean. So wouldn't that tell you, if you think about it, that they consider them just another tribe of sorts? What would be different? And if you look at them, like I said, like if you look at them like squirrels or raccoons, there's nothing unnatural to us about that. Why do we get so crazy about these things? Again, because we don't understand. They're big. They've been said to be aggressive. We don't understand. You bump into them in the woods. They don't want you there. You don't want to be there. You know what I mean? Or you startle, each other, or they really are aggressive to keep you out of their business because, look what's happened to anybody.
When you're in the woods, you're a guest in their house, so their rules apply.
Maybe they were around and saw what happened to the indigenous people in in our area and say, "Hey, heck no, you ain't coming in here and pushing us out." They're fighting for the territory, or maybe they don't. Maybe they just are distracting you by throwing rocks and stuff, so the rest of them could get away. So many things could be misunderstood. I defend my territory, right? So again, if you think about it that way, if you think about a pack of wolves, now you just have a pack of wolves. Is it like that though? Are dogmen like this? Are they just I'm not saying an evolved breed of a wolf, but similar to that in the next step, I guess. I'm not really saying evolution, but I'm saying like the next step. But how did we get there, Steve?
Yeah, or their learning capacity, or their way that they learn things.
Yeah, but do you think in the case of the dogmen, and I'm just asking, I'm just throwing darts at the board here. Do you think it was a natural progression? Because I'm not even questioning that they exist at this point. I'm saying how did they get here? So we've got accounts of them going back thousands of years, for sure. And that's not coming from me. That's from people who know what they're talking about. I'm just parroting that, but it seems like they've gotten more so and more aggressive and smarter and you're getting a little bit more of the telepathic stuff. Now, I don't know if they did it back then and we just didn't know about it. People didn't know how to write it, or we're not picking up on it. But, and it's just, they stayed the same, or they've evolved. And did they have help? Because I'm starting to hear things about.
Yeah, well, we've encroached on their territory, and they're kind of pushing back now. It's like coyotes in urban areas. You have that. You have bears coming out of the woods and into the cities and stuff, because we've gone so far into their habitat that now they feel welcome to come into ours. And I think it could be the same with cryptids and things like that. They're
absolutely it could. Yep. And that's what, funny you should say that, because I believe I kind of was leaning toward that in the book and saying perhaps, they were pushed up out of Louisiana, because, the whole thing starts to roll and snowball because there is a mass of these creatures that don't belong in this territory for some reason have had to migrate and move, just like any, indigenous people, got pushed out and had to move or had to follow the buffalo, or, think of it that way. But if you had a natural disaster like a hurricane with massive floods, like say something like Katrina, that would have to push out the things in the creatures in the woods too. And I experienced that being in Alabama at that time. There was a huge influx of wildlife, and not just human beings bringing their pets and themselves.
Yeah,
but
if you go and build houses in there, they've got to go somewhere.
Yeah. So, but that also changes wherever they decide to land. Now they've got to find new territory. So they've got to fight for it. They've got to search for it. They've got to, you know what I mean? And with something like a pack of dogmen getting moved, or a group of Bigfoot, I don't know what you
they've
call
got
them.
their own pecking order. They've got, their alpha creatures. So they're fighting amongst them, and then they're all banding together to fight against the encroachment on their habitat or their territory.
And the same thing happens with the human beings. Same deal, dude.
Exactly.
Because everybody's got to move up here. They got to find space. They got a place to live, a place to work. They got to find, again, and it changes things. Even it might be subtle, and you don't see it all at once, or it could be something as drastic as
Nicole and I were talking about that the other day. A lot of wars are fought over pieces of property, over land. This is our land. You can't have it. No, we're going to take it. You even see that like with the street gangs and stuff. They've got their block, their territory. They'll fight to the death for it, because you don't come onto our block. You stay on your block.
Yep. And I think it's a big deal. And if you think about it, like I said, I know I keep bringing up nature, but people seem to be able to digest it so much easier when you think about, a bunch of beaver that their home got destroyed and things changed, flooded out, something happened, a forest fire.
But
they got to go somewhere to fight for territory.
Have you ever gone out in the woods and seen a house where nature has just taken it back over? I came across one time what I thought was the largest clump of kudzu that I'd ever seen. Turns out there was a house in there, an abandoned house. Nature had overclaimed. There was trees growing up through the roof and stuff, but it was, back to nature. Nature had reclaimed it.
Wow.
And I think, nature's always going to win for the most part. I think we do some terrible things to it, but it's the wheels of nature grind slow but fine, to paraphrase there.
That's the whole point. It's extremely resilient, but you know what? So are we, and so is any creatures that's walking out there, whether it's a pack of raccoon or a pack of
they learn to adapt in order to survive, just like people.
Or even if you're talking about ghosts, you could add the same thing to them if you're talking about a house or like a haunted prison or a haunted hospital or whatever. One of the most interesting things to think about is, are they aware of each other? That's a great question to ask about that. And I would have to say some are, some aren't.
Yeah, exactly.
In
There are
my
no
experience,
hard and fast
right?
answers. And that's the whole thing about
When they
studying
leave,
the
it's
paranormal
up
and
to
the
them.
supernatural. What applies
Yep.
in one particular case may not apply in any other case, or it could apply in several other cases. And it's not a one size fits all way to look at things.
Yeah. And you have to think, too, it's like almost you have to sift through, you have to do a triage. I mean, if you went at something like this and you had the ability and you could sort it and you could get everybody to listen, which is, I've already gone way off the board because that's almost a near impossibility because you've got all these different ghosts all vibrating at a different, just like we are. Basically, you have a bunch of people from Walmart. If you just go to Walmart and everybody all of a sudden is just standing around and they're staring at you, not saying anything, or some of them are yelling and you can't quite understand them because maybe several are yelling at once. I know people have to live with this stuff. It's insane. And if you could get everybody, okay, everybody stop. Wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
And one at a time here. Now you're going to hear the ones with the strongest, if they were the strongest, most boisterous in life, if they had a lot of energy, if they were the ones that would command the room, they're probably going to be the same now. There's not a lot of, especially if they haven't crossed, there's very little change from your earth, your living personality to your dead personality.
Most hateful, nastiest ghosts were that way in life as well. It just had carried over with them to the afterlife.
Yeah.
I believe that.
But, even when you cross, there's a lot of people have to go through a lot of healing. Now, this is just what I've learned, over time from a lot of very wise people, that don't know each other, that all say the same thing. Now, isn't that amazing? Must be true. All different walks of life, from all around the globe, different traditions, heritages, beliefs, ages, you name it, across the board, and all come up with the same thing. Well, what does that tell you? Some bit of it must be true,
Yeah.
And, when you go over, a lot of souls have to go through a healing process, and you have help doing this. And is that the same for everybody? I would have to say no, because it depends on how you are and how
like
you are
medical
when you
treatment
leave.
or something. So
When you leave, yeah.
two different people respond to the same treatment in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. And some need a lot more of
how much you want to be. That the human condition there plays a lot, I think, in medicine or anything like that. It's how badly you want it to work. That can play a part in it.
Right. And so imagine standing in a hospital, or something like that, just to, insert your haunted building here, and there, where a group of people would be, a battlefield maybe. And you've got all these around you, and you just can't assume that they're all in the same mindset as a group. You know what I mean? Each one of them is just as individual as we are. It's no different. And we forget that, I think, sometimes, So what are they thinking? What's going on in their mind? How do we look to them? Can they all see me? Can they see each other? Do they know they're dead?
I'm reminded of that story you told about the elevator. Would you recount that one again? I think that was at Gettysburg.
Oh, I would love to. This is Gettysburg College, one of my favorites, and I have to give full credit to a good friend. I just love him and his wife, Mr. Mark Nesbitt from out of Gettysburg. He runs the Candlelight Ghost Tours there. He was I always call him a park ranger, and I think that's correct, but it sounds funny because I think of Picnic Basket when
haunted park ranger.
Yogi Bear. Yeah, I think of Yogi Bear when I say that. But anyway, it's a gathering. I wouldn't even say it's his story, but he has collected the stories from the witnesses that this happened to over the years, and it's his story. So for Mark. So anyway, it's happened at Gettysburg College, and if you know about anything about Gettysburg, it was one of the bloodiest 3 days ever happened in the Civil War. There's, definitely bloody battles all through the American Civil War, but Gettysburg was no doubt very notable. And Gettysburg College is an amazing building, wonderful, wonderful history. But it's now, of course, like anything else, more modernized. It was like every other building anywhere in or near Gettysburg, from spread out quite a bit. Most every house that had a basement was used as a hospital. Everybody's living room, everybody, just imagine, because it's a very small town, and it was 2,000 people, roughly. And in one day, they had about 150,000 soldiers bearing down on them from all directions, and every single one of them was there to fight. So it was quite the mess. So Gettysburg College, of course, was used as a makeshift hospital and had quite a bloody time of it, I assure you. And the story begins now, flash forward. It is in modern times, and the college is still going and is very, just very busy. And they were having a late night meeting for the administration, and it was just getting released. And I think it was 3 people in the original story, the first story I ever heard about it. They got in the elevator to go home, and they're chit-chatting, and they pushed the button to go down to I think it was the lobby. I don't think it was the garage. It was a lobby. And the elevator kept going down, 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 down. And it passes the first floor, and it keeps going down to the basement. And apparently it was a sub basement. If you've ever been in those elevators where it's got a basement and then a basement 1 or a basement 2. So those are more like the maintenance basements, or the access to electrical and things like that to run this huge, big building. And it keeps going down. And they're pushing buttons, and of course it's not doing anything. And finally it stops, and the doors open. And when the doors open, they are bombarded by sounds of cries and screams and people in agony from all directions. Right in front of them is a live performance of what that place must have looked like during the Battle of Gettysburg. And they were using it as a hospital. So you've got soldiers acting like orderlies and carrying bodies on stretchers back and forth. You've got men lined up against the walls, leaning and trying to help each other with their wounds. You've got people forced in the physician position, I guess you could say, and trying to ready a soldier to get his leg amputated. And then you've got something else going over here. And so every direction these people looked in, there was another scene of horror and gore and agony and despair. And they were so overwhelmed with this wave of all of this, the visual, the sounds. And all 3 of them seemed to focus or be pulled to look in the direction of this one physician that was trying to help this man that was being held down by another 3 or 4. And the physician actually looked up from his work and looked directly at them and gave them a look of like, help me. And mouthed something to them, but they all said it just like that.
And I conjectured, they were seeing something from the past. But when that event happened in the past, do you think that surgeon saw the wall open up and saw these oddly dressed people standing there? Maybe he thought they were angels or something that had just appeared, and that's why he was asking for their help. That's just that story gives me the chills. There's so many different ways you can go with that.
Yep, absolutely. And it does. It gives you the chills, and it makes you stop and think. And when you said that, that's what I mean. Meant earlier when I was talking about the vantage point of the experiencer too, the living person that sees whatever, whether it's a Bigfoot or ghost or has an experience like this. This is so much more than seeing a ghost. Now you got to kind of pick it apart.
Did it just fade out, or did the doors close? And when they opened them again,
the doors closed.
Yeah,
the doors closed, and it moved and it went up. And I believe
they went back down and looked, and nothing down there.
I believe in this case, if we're talking about the original story of this that Mark put in his first book. It was, yes, they went upstairs. They went back up to where they had just come from, and they went and talked to some of the administration that was still there that they had just left this meeting from, and told them, and somebody went down with them, and I can't remember whether it was like a manager of the building or their boss or, whatever, but I think somebody went down with them, and it was gone. Now,
so it definitely wasn't the best reenactment ever. It was a glimpse literally into the past.
Yeah, or slip in time or whatever. And the thing was, Mark and I talked about this many times over the years. And I've gotten to talk to his wonderful wife, Carol, and get her perspective, because she actually went to Gettysburg College and still is involved in strongly in the alumni and everything else over there. I mean, that's just the way Gettysburg is. It's just a big little town, runs high on history, trust me. So, and they both are of the, get their vantage point on it. We were talking and we brought this up about, okay, is it the one guy that made that connection, that intelligent connection? So now we know it's not a loop, and it's not a loop replaying. It made intelligent contact. It looked right at them, and it's tried to speak to them, and at least and possibly send them a telepathic message of help me, because they all heard it. They didn't in their head, I guess. I don't know. You'd have to ask them. By the time they went up and came back down, it was gone. So we were trying to figure out, is it the one guy using an amazing amount of energy to manifest a scene of one of his most horrible days of his life, in complete agony and angst, and just, reaching out for help. And he's the ghost, and he's manifesting that, and the others are not ghosts? Or is it a group effort? You see what I'm saying? That's a great question to try to figure out, how is this manifesting? And if it is him, if it is one very powerful ghost that over time builds up this energy to be able to every once in a while do this, because it's happened more than once over the years to different people. So is it taking him so much time to gather so much energy to be able to project this for a moment to try to get help? And I asked Mark, what do you think about that? And he looked at Carol, and Carol looked at him, and she says, well, it is the electrical room for the entire college now. It's the electrical supply storage unit for the entire college on that side, on that wing. And I'm like, well, there you go. So
yeah, that electricity, they were using that to manifest, or that allowed for that rift in time or whatever.
Wow.
Electricity and geomagnetic things. You hear a lot of cases where that plays a part in it, or seems to.
Yeah. I mean, just think about it, see? And it's so interesting to think about, what is the guy seeing, like you said? Does he see angels? Is he talking to somebody? This is just a moment in time where there's 3 other people, or 1 other person, or 2 other people that are actually walked in at that time, and he's talking to them, and it was just great timing? Or does he actually see them? And how does he see them? Does he see them as they're dressed now? Mind blown there thinking about that. Or does he see them, like you said, like angels, or somebody that's just showed up, that looks like anybody else around him?
But with the fact that he locked eyes with them and acknowledged them, that's the mind-blowing part to me.
Yep, absolutely. And that shows you right there. It's not a loop. It's not residual.
Yeah, it's not residual. That's a very active haunting, or something.
Angle. What if? Yeah. Here's another angle. What if? Okay, wrap your bean around this one. What if everybody else in the room, the orderlies, the wounded, the nurses, whatever is there in this scene, what if they're residual, and he's just a ghost kind of riding in like a surfer on a wave, and he's intelligent, and he just fit in there because he was part of that? Now, I don't know if that's possible. So basically a ghost taking advantage of the scenery and just kind of riding in on the loop, and kind of adding to it.
I can get that. I never would have thought about that, but
he's intelligent.
I would say that's a possibility.
Yeah, but he's the only one. Everybody else is just, they're not really there. You know what I mean? But he is. That's crazy. See, again, more questions. Paranormal onion, Steve.
Yeah, you peel that layer off, there's more onion underneath.
Or underneath.
Or like Soraya, his analogy was it's like you're trying to do a big jigsaw puzzle, but you don't have the top of the box to see what the picture is supposed to look like. And once you get in there and start picking these pieces out, you figure out that some joker has mixed in 7 or 8 puzzles, and some of the pieces don't fit anywhere.
And you don't even know what you got anyway. You think you got a piece, and you think you know where it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, then it turns out that's not it at all. But getting back to the book, that was such an enjoyable thing to do, to be able to read your stories and then I called it a color commentary. I was just, I wanted it to be more than, what she said. And then I would tell a story or an anecdote or whatever, but it all just fits seamlessly. And there were stories in there that I'd had similar experiences to, like the Christmas feather and some of those. And then you've got some just terrifying stories in there, especially the opener, the one about the screaming head and the red ribbon in the old farmhouse that you lived in there that dated back to Revolutionary War times. Now, I believe that was in New Jersey, if memory serves me correctly. So I'd like to just, you don't have to give the whole thing because they'll definitely want to read the book, but give us a teaser on that one. Can you recount that story about the screaming head and the red ribbon?
If I'm reading it right now and I'm tracking you, I think you're just asking me to tell a ghost story. Now, I don't know if I can do that. You asked me to tell a ghost story.
I have faith in you.
You have to pull my arm, right? Okay. Let's see if we can do it. Let's see how we do. All right. I'm a toddler. And I know it sounds strange that somebody could remember a flash. I mean, a little more than a toddler. I was probably, 4. Anyhow, I'm asleep on my mom's bed. Now, this is a big old king-size bed in a little old farmhouse that's about 200 years old, close to it, in Jackson, New Jersey. And it was a great farmhouse. It had cornfields in the back as far as the eye could see. Had a big old red barn that I refused to go into unless I absolutely had to, and I did it quick because there was something really bad in that barn. But that's not the story tonight. And it was big with a grand staircase, and it was filled with my brothers and sisters and my mom and my dad. And there was always something going on in that house. But this memory, I'm sleeping on the bed, taking a nap in my mom and dad's room. And it was very colonial, Revolutionary War style. Most places were back then in this area. And it had big shutter. The whole wall, it seemed, was shutter doors for a closet, big walk-in closet. My mom's and my dad's suits and my mom's dresses and that kind of thing. And they're real tall and skinny. And when you grab the knob and you fold them up, it's like an accordion on both sides. Old colonial shutters. And they have slats with space in between them. And all of a sudden, I start hearing a crackling. And the closest thing I could come to now, it's close, it's just a little off. But if you grabbed a water bottle and you just squeezed it, and you made that crackling sound, this little half-empty water bottle, it was kind of like that, but very loud. It got louder. And it made me sit up and look at the sound because I thought my sisters were in the closet or the doors opened or something. I was expecting to see them. But what I saw was this light that had started almost at the bottom of the closet, and it was kind of pushing out through the bottom, the space in the closet the shutter doors, the floor. And I could look right down off the edge of the bed and see it. And as I'm looking at it and listening to this crackling noise, I'm trying to figure out what I'm seeing, it's growing and it's going up inside of the closet, and the light's pushing through the slats of these shutter doors. And the noise is kind of changing, but I don't know if it was because there's buzzing in my, I can remember this like buzzing or this like kind of not really buzzing, but more like a woo, 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 woo sound, almost like the slow helicopter blades sound would be, or a big fan. And the light's getting bigger, and it's more and more of this light is pushing out through these slats. And it seemed like the light kind of came together, and it began in the center to sparkle a little bit and seemed to like almost come together and start to form a shape. And this shape was now outside of the closet completely and hovering in this light. And it was coming towards me. And the closer it got, the clearer it got. And it was a head that stopped at the neck. And it was, from what I could understand, a man, a young man, and I honestly remember telling this when I was little and saying younger than my dad, like a kid would guess an age, So let's go with that. He had dark brown hair, and it was long and really wavy. And it was held back in a ponytail, and I couldn't see it when it was coming at me, but you could see something fluttering around behind him that was brown. And as this thing is shooting at me, it's looking at me. And it's when it opened its eyes, because its eyes seemed to be closed when he first came in, and the light started to like come all around him. When his eyes opened, this red light was coming out of him. And when he got right in front of me, his jaw kind of dropped open like he was going to scream, but nothing came out. And at that point in time, it was so close to me, I couldn't think of anything to do but just to lay flat. So I dropped back, laid flat on my back on the bed, and I watched it shoot over me and into the wall behind my mother's headboard and disappear into the wallpaper and gone. And the sound and all the light went with it and just gone. And you're just laying there. And that's when I started to scream. And that's when a couple of sisters and my mom ran in, all bustling in through the door. What, get her 7 and 9 or whatever. I'm hearing all these different voices at the same time, and I'm screaming all on top of it. Somebody picked me up, was bouncing me around, and they're talking to each other. We wind up going into the living room, and I hear my mom say, go get her, she's had a nightmare, just go get her something. And I was off to get something. I can't remember whether it was a cookie or, a glass of water. I don't even know what it was. As I'm being carried away from my mom and my other sister, my sister said to my mom, she's describing it just like me, Mom. Red eyes, red ribbon. Because when this thing flew over me, I told you the ponytail was like floating behind him, but it was held together with this long red ribbon tied in a bow, the back of his head. And that was the last thing I saw flutter out through the wallpaper, was that ponytail and that red ribbon. And I remember as a little kid thinking that ribbon matched his eyes. And as I was crying, I was telling my mother, red eyes, red ribbon, red eyes, red ribbon, red eyes, red ribbon. And I'm being carried out. I hear my sister validate. And that was really important because as I grew up around them, we couldn't talk about this. So you didn't get to sit at the table and discuss, what the ghost did today or what you saw in the barn. So getting those little snippets of validation, I held on to that, almost 60 years now. So that's the flying head.
And then there was a little more to that. In that same house, your dad was doing something and found some stuff hidden in the wall. Now, and I don't remember the details of it, but I wonder if it wasn't related to the specter that you and your sister observed.
I think, I'm telling you, this looking back, it's such a wild journey because in my case, and I wonder how many people this kind of happens to. You hear other stories where it takes them years to kind of sort what happened. Again, like life, to get the big picture. It takes a while to sort it out, right, Steve? Yep. So, and why should ghosts be any different? So, the thing is during this time, like I said, we didn't talk about it. So, pieced together about 20, 25 years after the fact, it starts coming together. And I remember from my vantage point at what I remember from what I saw was my sister screaming, people trying to get in the door, doors locked. She's screaming, there's a man in my room. And I'm on somebody's hip. And, somebody's got a slipper. Somebody's got a golf club. My sister golfed, brother played baseball. He had a bat. It's like, I think the other one had a hairbrush. I don't know. I remember, I'm seeing it from here.
Armed to the teeth.
Yeah. And my dad and my brother are trying to get in the door. They're banging on it and there's lots of screaming and yelling. So anyway, I remember when the door hit, finally the door opened, I got a glimpse, of my sister, like up on the bed and like kind of back and pointing. And when my family went in, I didn't get to go. I went in the other direction. Somebody said, put her back to bed, whatever. I was gone. I had no control back then. I was on a sister's hip. I didn't have any say in the matter. So I find out later that when they went in, there was Noxema all over the mirror. Now, Noxema is a cream that came in a little blue container with a little white lid. And it was a big deal. A lot of the teenage girls used it back then. This is 68, maybe 69, maybe 67.
Yeah, I remember those ads are supposed to give you clear skin, and any teenage girl that wanted clear skin, get rid of acne or whatever, Noxema was the order of the day.
It was a cold cream, and it had a little mint to it or a little something. It had a little tingle going on. I remember that. Anyway, I had many sisters in the house, and it was definitely used by several. So my sister had typed out this report. Now, it was a big deal if you have one typewriter and like 6 teenagers, and everybody's got a report due, So it was a big deal. It was one of those weeks. So my sister had finally typed out this report, and she had put it on top of her dresser. And this is one of those high, I guess they call it chiffre or something. It was a high stack of drawers with a mirror above it, but it was taller than it was fat. Does that make sense? So it was kind of high up. And she's in the mirror putting Noxema on, and I was bugging her, and she put some on my nose, and then she laughed and she picked me up. We went and all washed it off. And I saw that jar, she had put the lid on it tight and stuck it up high up and pushed it up against the wall under that mirror. She didn't want me to reach it, right? Because I was bugging her. I want to use it. And of course, you want to get it out of the little, bugger's reach, right? And it makes total sense. She carries me out. We wash it off. We go and say goodnight to sisters and all that stuff. And that's the last I knew till, everybody's got a golf club and screaming in the hallway. So later we pieced it together, and I start hearing little bits here, little bits there from everybody. What had happened was they go in. Now this report is all tore up all over the place. Noxema all over the mirror. There's a man in my room. She had seen this Revolutionary War soldier ghost standing outside of her closet, which was kind of out of sight of the door. I only saw her in the bed. Well, she's pointing, I couldn't see, but that's where the closet was, right? And there was a whole bunch more. You can read it in the book if you want to, but there was a little bit more about what they found when they went in the room, and there was a handprint on the mirror, and it was, too big to be hers, and the door was locked, and it snowed outside, and there was no footprints. It's just like, what are you going to do? But we didn't talk about it. I had no idea. Like as a kid, I couldn't say to her, hey, that's what I saw, because we didn't talk about it. So it's weird to think it took that long, but it did. So then you look back at what you mentioned, Steve. I also find out that my dad, I guess my mom finally bugged my dad enough to finally start that pantry she needed in the kitchen. And he got mad one day and probably had a few too many beers or whatever, and coerced my brother in helping him with a sledgehammer to knock the wall out. And when they knocked it out, they found some stairs. And they found a little room with the servants' stairway that went up to the back of the master bedroom, which was that bedroom. And if you followed the stairs up, it would be the back door to her closet. And if you went through the closet, you'd enter her bedroom. And in that room, I've heard tell, they found some things. I never got to see them because they threw them on the scrap pile. Like I said, my dad was drunk. He didn't want anything to do with history. He didn't want that nonsense. But I heard there might have been some letters in there. But a couple people told me they saw whatever it was bound with a red ribbon. A red ribbon.
Wow.
Now that was commonly used back then, but you be the judge.
Yeah, and whatever it was, it sounds like it disturbed him to the point that he wanted to destroy it and get rid of it. So who's to say? But it all ties together. That you got the validation because you'd seen the same thing that your sister had seen, and then when they knocked that wall out, found the secret stairs with the hidden ephemera or artifacts or whatever all they found up there. And,
I think it was letters or something along those lines, papers, that kind of thing.
It's fascinating, and that's just the first.
But
chapter.
Like I said, I never got to see it. But I never got to, so I can't say this isn't something that I saw that, I was there and I saw it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
and that's
I can
just the first chapter of the book. I mean, it starts out, it's a wild ride. It is, as a subtitle, a guided tour through a haunted life. And there's everything in there. I mean, we don't have time to get into it here, but the possum and the snot hag, jumpers and grinners, which you talk about different kinds of entities, if you will, that you actually observed people, for lack of a better word, possessed by when you worked as a bartender, where people like something else would just suddenly take over and they would act out of character and ask for something that they didn't normally drink, or one guy danced around with a pool cue and stuff so out of character for him. And the story of the biker, it's a fantastic book, and just I recommend it to everybody, even if I did have something to do with it. But again, I came along with the story about the Christmas feather that paralleled one of my own experiences. It's amazing.
It's true. And I think a lot of these things parallel, and I think that's what we're seeking in this whole thing, that paranormal parallel, that validation, that happened to me, or that's what I saw, that's what it was like when I saw that. That's what they, I heard somebody else came through and said something like that matches up. And we don't do that enough. It's like a lot of really good mediums, they'll have a show or whatever you want to say, get together. I hate to call it a show because that kind of infers that they're putting on, like a magician thing. I mean, mediums, I mean the ones that sit down and can sit and do a group, which is great because a lot of good ones really can do that, and they can sort out all the energies, and it energizes everything to have more than one, but you have some really good one-on-ones too. But that's it, the paranormal parallel. So if you've got a lot of mediums that are coming through and contacting the people that are coming through from the other side, you've got this, why is it so broke up? Why won't they just spit it all out? Well, it's like this, it's like this, it's like this. But you do have that story. You have that story because it's pieced together by multiple people having experiences or having abilities that have come through with information, and it validated time and time and time again. It's like being in a room and hearing somebody get this wonderful message from the other side. Detailed filled, fact filled. There's no doubt this is their loved one. They're telling the story. They're healing the wounds. It's wonderful. And the message is love never dies. Love is eternal. Of course I'm here. Of course I love you. Of course, forgiveness is key. Let's forgive each other if we've done something to hurt each other's feelings. I love you. That doesn't matter anymore. That kind of thing. Yet everybody who didn't get a direct message in that group and goes home feels bad they didn't get a message, instead of saying everybody here got a message, and the common core was love never dies. I forgive you. I love you. Most important thing is, go on with your life. I'm fine. I'm doing all right. I see you. All of these things, instead of going, man, that was fantastic. I feel so good, much better. Even though I didn't hear from Aunt Mary, or I didn't hear from Dad, or hear from my dog, or whatever, I feel I've got a little bit more bounce in my faith in that he's okay and he's doing fine. But so many of us talk ourselves out of that joy and that hope. And before long, we're right back into that same old grind again, and that, those lower vibrational feelings about that. And I try to tell my listeners, and, when chances come up, I try to give the advice, and I give this to anybody listening tonight, that if you have someone who has passed, I urge you to give it a try. And again, I am not saying do not grieve. I am saying that is personal, and nobody can tell you when to start it or stop it or how to do it. I can tell you how to help get through it. And I can tell you in a way that helps both you and the loved one you're grieving. That go ahead and have your memory. If the song that you hear reminds you of them and it makes you cry, go ahead and do it. All I ask is, before you finish all of that and the thought and go on about your day, think of something happy about that person and let them know you're thinking it. Say, hey, remember that time this song came on and you broke the heel on your shoe and you got it caught in the boardwalk? Or, hey, remember when we were working on that car, Dad, and this song came on and you couldn't get that bolt loose? That was funny. That was a great day, Dad. And send, I love you. Happy thoughts and energy to you. By the time you get done with that thought, you're going to feel better. You've had your memory and you smiled at the end. That is going to give them more energy. And it's also going to create a beginning of an easy path, like making a pathway through the woods, through the wilderness, so they can get to you easier. And when you start recognizing that and you start giving them that love energy, you're going to feel better and they're going to feel better. Instead of being worried you can't buy them flowers to take to the grave, buy the flowers, arrange them, and talk about a happy memory you had with them and enjoy them for both of you. Because I promise you, if you do it that way, they are enjoying them with you. They are there for that moment. Just like John Wilkes Booth showed up in the gift shop at Ford's Theater, or that Rougarou, or that Bigfoot, or that creature in the woods might show up if you talk about them and you connect into their energy.
Well said.
All connected.
It is. Everything is connected. That's very poignant. And unfortunately, we've run out of time for this episode. But I want to thank you for joining me tonight on Everything Out There. And again, the book, you can find it on Amazon. We Are All Children in the Wilderness of the Afterlife, a guided tour through a haunted life. And the YouTube channel, Journey Through the Gate, Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm over there live on Monday nights. We invite you to join us, take part, be a part of the community, or just lurk and listen. I guarantee you'll think about things differently. You might even learn something. Sysco, again, thank you for joining me for this episode. We'll have to have you back on to talk some more stories out of the book.
I'll be here. I got a few more. I bet you I can crack open the book and pull up a couple stories.
All right, good deal. Thanks again.
Good night, my friend.
Good night.